Hey, everybody, and welcome. A turning point in the Russia investigation. President Trump submitting written answers to special counsel Robert Mueller's questions as the president again takes aim at the probe amid questions over whether Mueller is close to submitting his final report, or if new subpoenas or indictments could be coming. This is Outnumbered. I'm Julie Banderas, and joining us as we gear up to celebrate Thanksgiving, we've got Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, former Ohio Senate Democratic Minority Leader Capri Cafaro, rocking the glasses today. We love it. Fox News contributor Rachel Campos Duffy, and joining us on the couch today, Republican Congressman Sean Duffy of Wisconsin, also known as Mr. Rachel Campos.
Mr. Rachel, that's right.
I was going to say, I bet you love that, too.
I'm
My
Rachel's
producer asked me before.
You got the right title.
You call him that? I'm like, absolutely.
I think you two know each other, right?
Yeah. Don't you have a kid or two together as well?
One or two.
They're so cute. Your kids are the cutest.
I do congressional events now, and people used to say, yeah, you come, we'll do the event. Now they say, I'll do an event for you as long as Rachel comes. We'll help you out. So
yeah,
she's the hot ticket item.
They have their priorities right
Yeah,
now.
seriously.
All right,
sounds right.
They're watching the right channel.
Love it. Okay, so after months of negotiating, President Trump sends written responses to Mueller's questions on the investigation into Russia meddling in the 2016 election. So the president is speaking to reporters before heading to Mar-a-Lago for the holiday, and again, slamming the probe. Watch this.
The written answers to the witch hunt that's been going on forever. No collusion, no nothing. They've been finished. Finished them yesterday.
And the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, suggesting the president would resist any subpoena, but predicts Mueller won't actually issue one. And he tells Axios, and I'm quoting, I think that he would not win a legal battle if he did that. And I think it would consume months. I don't think he has any way to compel testimony on obstruction because the argument of executive privilege would be very, very strong. It all relates to a period of time after he was president. Well, Giuliani also said that he can't tell if Mueller has given up on obstruction, but says he thinks their obstruction case as a legal matter doesn't exist. Rachel, let me start with you. First of all, there have been 1.4 million pages that the administration has turned over in this investigation. He's now answered these questions. They're all mainly Russia related. Giuliani says that they are completely out of line. Is the investigation far reaching? Are they running out of ideas? I mean, it seems like they've become desperate.
Absolutely. It needs to come to an end. And I think if the American people actually believed that there was something there, that he had colluded with the Russians, it would have still been their talking point in the midterm. If you look at the midterm elections, if you polled Americans, it wasn't hardly on the list. It was like number 5 or 6 or 7. And if you listen to what the Democrats were talking about, they were talking about health care. They're not talking about Russia because there's nothing there. Everything that could have come out would have already come out.
And that's why Democrats won. Because we weren't focusing on this.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. And I think the American people think this is, for the most part, a political exercise on the part of Mueller and others, and they just want it to end and move on.
I mean, what do you make, Lisa, first of all, of what, Capri just said, that this is why the Democrats won? I mean, the Democrats won because we focus
on real issues.
But it is very common, though, when you have a Republican in the White House for the opposite side to...
Or vice versa.
Yes, exactly.
Although I think the hope that this is going to die down is not going to happen because you do have an incoming Adam Schiff as the House Intel chairman who's already signaled that this is going to be a focus of his, Russia, regardless what the Mueller investigation turns out. So I don't really think that's going away. However, I do think that the talking point and the focus that there needs to be some sort of Mueller protection bill is now ridiculous because, as Giuliani pointed out, 30 witnesses, 1.4 million pages of material. President Trump has also answered these questions. So at this point, what investigation needs to be protected? He's already a participant and has done everything he can to participate in this. However, I am a little bit concerned that this is more of an investigation in search of a crime. We now have both the House and Senate chairman of the Intel Committee saying that they don't see anything here. Even Peter Strzok, who hated Trump, said in his text messages he didn't even want to be part of the special counsel investigation because he didn't think anything was there.
Sean, now we've got Jeff Sessions out, Matt Whitaker in. How does Matt Whitaker's appointment now change things with this investigation moving forward?
I don't think we know. Right? I think Whitaker's made some comments in the past when he wasn't in the DOJ in regard to how the investigation should be looked at. But again, I think that has yet to be determined. But in regard to this investigation as a whole, we can't forget the root of this investigation information came from the dirty dossier from Hillary Clinton. I mean, Hillary Clinton still has her tongs into American politics, and the information in the dossier came from Russians. I think that's fascinating, and I think that President Trump is smart to continue to call it a witch hunt because that's what it is. And Rudy Giuliani is smart to make sure that they're only answering questions in the written form. Rachel and I have 8 kids. We're about to come to Black Friday, so I think of Connect 4. When you play Connect 4, when you get someone, no matter where they move, they're going to be caught. You're going to win. We're trying to keep Donald Trump out of that situation in regard to a trap.
Sounds a little bit more like Twister, though.
Well, yeah, maybe. Twitter, Connect 4.
I was just going to say, this is what he said. In his statement, he said, always be careful when you answer questions with people that probably have bad intentions. So he's trying to be careful and write them, as you said, because he doesn't trust these, as you said.
But as long as you tell the
truth,
it doesn't matter what the question is.
But that's not necessarily true, Capri, because we do have the instance of Michael Flynn, and you had FBI, or at least according to Republicans, they had FBI investigators had told congressional Republicans that they didn't think that Michael Flynn had lied or misled them. And then Mueller takes over, and then Michael Flynn pleads to, lying. So I don't necessarily know if that's entirely true.
Unless they think that they have a reason to.
But why is that true?
Well, you're a prosecutor, so I will defer to you.
I was a former prosecutor, state prosecutor, by the way, but you can put a lot of pressure on defendants. And with regard to Michael Flynn, the financial pressures of just defending himself were so great, and they made threats to his family and prosecuting his children. He had to actually go, listen, I got to resolve this issue and put it behind me. Otherwise, I'm going to go bankrupt. I'm going to lose my house. Everything I've built is going to go away. And that's the pressure that a prosecutor can put on a defendant. It's not necessarily that he was guilty or didn't want to fight it. It's that he doesn't have the resources to actually fight.
I just want to say one thing as far as transparency is concerned here, because the Democrats have been railing against, number one, Matt Whitaker's comments that he made in the past about the Russia investigation. But he also has come forward and said he would recuse himself and that he does, in fact, want this investigation to proceed, that he would not try to block Robert Mueller. So if you've got Matt Whitaker, who is coming out and saying he wouldn't want to block this investigation.
So first of all, I think as Republicans, we think it's a witch hunt. We don't think that it's a bogus investigation based on
Not all Republicans think it's a witch hunt.
But hold on. I also think that if you're Donald Trump, you want to actually have this investigation completed.
Which is why he's been so forthright, which is why he wanted to answer the questions. Which is why originally he wanted to sit down with Robert Mueller. And in fact, it was his lawyers that said no, but he said, look, I will go by the advice of my lawyers. I don't think that would have been a good idea, first of all, because he would have railroaded him. Robert Mueller would have if he had sit down.
And Congress, even in the written format, what sort of legal liability does President Trump face in answering these questions?
Well, listen, I mean, if you have a prosecutor who's trying to catch you or trap you, you can say that you've lied in answering the questions.
Do you think that's the case with Mueller?
Listen, I'm concerned, and I guess everyone says Mueller was a Republican and Mueller was a conservative, but when you build your team around a whole bunch of Democrat donors or Hillary Clinton donors that lean left, you lose the appearance of impartiality. And I think there's a lot of great prosecutors, a lot of great investigators that Mueller could have built his team around that have not given any money to Republicans or Democrats, but he chose to take some left-leaners. So that gives me some pause and concern. Are they trying to
still in charge,
or are they
he is
trying
still
to
in charge.
get to the truth?
Being a Republican doesn't mean necessarily that you are agreeing with Trump's version of events. There's plenty of knives out to get Donald Trump on
Being
the
a Democrat
Trump
doesn't
side.
mean you're out to get him either necessarily.
Well, but I think that Sean makes a really great point. I know he's my husband.
Really?
There's no bias at all on that statement.
I think Sean makes a great point about the fact that he had an opportunity to put people on his team who at least had the appearance of impartiality, and he didn't. And so you have to wonder, why wouldn't he do that?
I'm wondering how the president feels, though, about Whitaker saying that he would recuse himself, because he was so hell-bent on Jeff Sessions not recusing himself. And remember, he never forgave him for that. And now he's got Matt Whitaker. But then in the president's defense, it looks good for the president that he's got his guy who's basically taking the same stance as Jeff Sessions.
Well, I think you could make the argument that the person that needs to recuse themselves, and I mentioned this before, is Rod Rosenstein. He's the guy that lays out the case to fire James Comey and then appoints a special counsel to look into it. That's pretty shady to me. So I think if anyone has a conflict of interest here, he does.
And so does Mueller. And that if he spent millions, I mean, think about the millions of dollars spent in this investigation so far. If he comes up with nothing, then what? There's a lot of pressure to come up with something to justify
How
all
do
these
we
years.
make the justice system impartial from politics?
How about the truth?
news?
Yeah.
The truth will set you free, they say.
We do have other topics to dive into, so we're going to have to move on. President Trump now fighting back against the ruling that blocked his policy on asylum seekers, what he says will happen, and if his criticisms are fair. Also, lawmakers now looking into Ivanka Trump's email use as the president and some Republicans come to her defense, whether an investigation is necessary and how this all compares to the Hillary Clinton.
The committee asked the White House for information on staffers' email practices last year, but never got anything back. Ms. Trump's legal team is defending her use of a private account, and so is President Trump.
Early on, and for a little period of time, Ivanka did some emails. They weren't classified like Hillary Clinton. They're all in presidential records. There was no hiding. There was no deleting like Hillary Clinton did. There was no service in the basement like Hillary Clinton had. You're talking about a whole different, you're talking about all fake news.
And he's not the only one coming to Ivanka Trump's defense. Republican Congressman Mark Meadows tweeting, there are over 30,000 bleach bit reasons why the Hillary Clinton email scandal isn't even close to the Ivanka email issue. But other Republicans want more information. Senate Homeland Security Chairman Ron Johnson saying he's, quote, concerned and calling for an official response by December 7th. Well, former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew McCarthy had this to say.
In this environment, particularly given how big an issue he made of Mrs. Clinton's use of private email to conduct official business, you have to wonder why anybody would do that. It's kind of an explosive thing at this point.
So, Congressman, should there be an investigation into this?
Well, I don't know there should be an investigation. I think it's foolish on behalf of Ivanka Trump to actually have a private email account when, I mean, the whole race for the last presidential cycle was about Hillary Clinton's illegal private email server and email accounts. And I think the president laid it out well. There's nothing comparable to what Ivanka did, what she was doing scheduling issues and forwarded all the emails, so it's of public record, to what Hillary Clinton did. Not only did she delete the 33,000 emails, we don't have them, but recall when her team took sledgehammers to their cell phones and destroyed the cell phones so there'd be no record of these emails. And again, over 100 of them were classified. There's no indication that these emails are classified. So there's no comparison between the two, number one. But number two, it is really easy now for Democrats to hit Donald Trump and Ivanka. I think it was an amateur move on her part.
Well, and Capri, to that point, I mean, there have been comparisons made to Hillary Clinton. To Mark Meadows' point and to the congressman's here, look, Hillary Clinton deleted 30,000 emails using BleachBit, set up her own private security or private server. Also, she was the nation's top diplomat and had classified information on that server. At least Ivanka's attorneys are saying that, she didn't have any classified information in her emails. So what do you make of those comparisons?
Well, I think that there needs to be at least some disclosure because it doesn't matter if you have a private server or if you're using a non-government email account. The content is still potentially subject to a Freedom of Information request. So, and it could be potentially classified or not classified. We don't know. That we're taking essentially Ivanka Trump's word for that. But there is a stark difference between these two things, because there is a difference between using a Gmail account or a Hotmail account and having a server in your basement. And this actually is one of the things that motivated me to give money against Hillary Clinton in 2016.
To Donald Trump?
No, to Joe Biden.
Oh, okay.
To Joe Biden. For the draft Joe Biden campaign, because I was actually driving out to this, to the running trail in Ohio, and I'm listening to her on Meet the Press, and she said, well, I just had the same server that my husband had when he was president in my basement. I'm like, what do you mean? AOL dial-up? That was 2000. You can't claim that email server. Are you kidding me? And so there's clearly some shady stuff there. I agree that it was an amateur move on Ivanka's part, but I don't think that it's necessarily the same.
Rachel, I mean, why do we keep seeing people in government making the same mistake, and what needs to be done about it?
I don't know, but can I just jump on another point that I think is interesting with Trey Gowdy, Ron Johnson? These are very prominent, respected members of the Republican conference, and they're saying they're not jumping on Ivanka, but they're saying, hey, we need to look at this. We want to get this information, send it to us. We want to make sure there's nothing classified, that there wasn't anything. I never saw that on the Democrat side and the part of Hillary Clinton. It was all cover up. It was all trying to, make sure that she had as little damage as possible, could make it through, the primary and into the election and win. And I look at the Republican. I'm a Republican.
What do you think is going to happen in January?
I look at the Republicans and I go, I'm proud that there's some independent thinking in there, that people can have different points of view and still be considered within the conference. And I don't think if you're a Democrat, if you had ever dared to call out Hillary, that you'd be allowed back
Julia,
in.
I want to get you in here. Does this sort of foreshadow what's ahead for the Trump administration in terms of investigation?
I mean, the Trump administration needs to just be more careful. I mean, this was a slip up. This was stupid. You don't send personal government-related emails. These started in December of 2016. But I honestly do not believe that Ivanka did this maliciously. She's not trying to cover anything up. I bet you half these emails are about her kids and family, personal business, and they are not classified. And she did not, take a BlackBerry and hammer it to death. There's a big difference. And she's also not the former Secretary of State, for God's sake.
James Comey, former FBI, also had a private email account. Why don't Democrats join us and say, let's get those emails as well? Let's look at everyone's
She's willing to turn them all over.
All right.
She didn't delete them, so let's look at them.
All right, well, more to come, because despite bipartisan criticism, President Trump is not backing off his support of Saudi Arabia. He says his administration will take no further action against the Saudis in the wake of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Whether this is the right move, we will debate it. Plus, the president on offense after a legal setback for his plan to crack down on asylum seekers. He's ripping a judge's ruling and laying out another plan. But will it work? Stay tuned.
Everybody that wants to sue the United States, they file their case in Olmos. They file their case in the Ninth Circuit.
Tijuana today as I stand here. In Mexicali, there are more than 3,000 caravan members. The crisis is real, and it is just on the other side of this wall.
So that's Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen at the southern border yesterday, calling out a decision by the Ninth Circuit Court, a federal judge blocking emergency restrictions on asylum claims meant to curtail illegal border crossings by members of migrant caravans. The president also slamming the ruling and federal judges. He says they act unilaterally to change executive branch policy, citing his travel ban as yet another example.
Well, you go to the Ninth Circuit and it's a disgrace, and I'm going to put in a major complaint, because you cannot win, if you're us, a case in the Ninth Circuit. And I think it's a disgrace when people every case gets filed in the Ninth Circuit, because they know that's not law. That's not what this country stands for. Every case that gets filed in the Ninth Circuit, we get beaten, and then we end up having to go to the Supreme Court, like the travel ban, and we won.
So is he right? Let me ask you, Congressman.
He's spot on. I mean, I think he lays the case out really well. You got a liberal activist set of judges on the Ninth Circuit Court that are going to promote a liberal progressive agenda. This is why elections have consequences, and why getting our judges on the courts to actually interpret the Constitution, not for the left, not for the right, but actually what does the Constitution say? And I think the president is obviously concerned. You have people who are organizing the caravans, who are coaching those in the caravan on how to get asylum and how to work over American laws to get access to our country. And the president is rightfully concerned and trying to say, listen, I got to protect our country from what is classified as an invasion of thousands of people.
Can I ask this question, though? As a member of Congress, I mean, the argument from the Ninth Circuit essentially, and I get the fact that, they are perceived, and rightfully so, that they lean left and whatnot. But the argument that they made was that it's a violation of the intent of the U.S. Immigration and Nationalization Act, which is obviously, an enacted law passed by Congress that essentially says, regardless of how an individual comes into the country, even if it's not a specific port of entry, they still are entitled to seek asylum. I mean, that's pretty cut and dry. So is the answer changing the law, Congressman?
Let me play this real quick, and then I want you guys to weigh in. A Harvard Law professor emeritus, Alan Dershowitz, weighing in as well. Listen.
The president is not correct when he talks about the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit has something like 26 or more judges. A lot of them are liberal Democrats. A lot of them are Trump appointees. Some of them appointees of Reagan or Bush. It's a very diverse circuit. But he's done better in the Supreme Court than he's done in the Ninth Circuit. But I think the judge, wrote a balanced, thoughtful decision, a decision that may well be overruled in the Supreme Court.
Okay, this coming in, crossing the wires right now, it's breaking. In a rare rebuttal, Chief Justice Roberts rejects President Trump's criticism of federal judges, this being crossed by the Associated Press just moments ago, and he praises independent judiciary.
Well, look, I think regarding the Ninth Circuit, I mean, look, the Ninth Circuit's been on the receiving end of criticism for many conservatives. And I will say, just to point out something funny, when President Trump pardoned the turkeys the other day, he took a swipe at the Ninth Circuit and said, unfortunately, I can't guarantee your pardon won't be enjoyed by the Ninth Circuit, which I don't know. I found that to be funny. But there is a real issue with asylum seekers and the fact that these migrants are coming to the United States and exploiting our laws. You see an 80% increase in family units crossing the border illegally since President Trump's zero tolerance policy ended. You look at the fact that 80% of these individuals will pass their initial interview, but then only 20% who actually show up in court will be granted asylum in immigration court. So there are real issues we're facing.
Shouldn't Congress be responsible?
Is Congress actually going to do anything, though? I think is the question.
So where were the courts when Obama implemented DACA? Right? I mean, he was changing immigration law. And when Trump tried to roll it back, they said, no, you can't roll back DACA. I agree that Congress should actually make the laws and the executive should enforce the laws. We're a far cry from that. But I think it's interesting. You mentioned John Roberts. Yeah. Remember when Barack Obama at the State of the Union chastised the Supreme Court right in front of him at the State of the Union in the House chamber? Right. And it looks like John Roberts was pretty silent from being chastised by Obama. But all of a sudden, no, he's found his backbone. I'm going to chastise Donald Trump for giving some pushback on the courts.
It's interesting to note then that this is, this is rare for a Supreme Court justice to come forward and say this. But the question is, would the president then win at the Supreme Court level?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that's what we're all going to try and find out. Listen, again, this is another case of Roberts, a supposed, a Republican who's, willing to go up. I think there's a lot of never-Trumpers out there. Some of them are on the Supreme Court. Some of them are in the deep state. We don't know. The point is, I think what American people want to know is, okay, you come to our borders, you say that you're seeking asylum, then we let you go and we somehow trust you that you're going to come back to
in 2 or 3 years.
In 2 or 3 years. It's so stupid.
And that's not cool. That is messed up.
I just think we can argue on all the finer points of the law and whether the president has the rights here or it's the Congress's job or whatever. But the average American person sitting back, looking at this argument goes, so why are we letting them go out in our country? Why are we trusting them to come back in 2 years?
What is President Trump supposed to do? You've got thousands of people, or we see these migrant caravans that want to come in, want to exploit our laws. Many of them want to cross the border illegally to try to get here, not going to port of entries. I mean, what is President Trump supposed to do?
Votes in the last 2 years where he controlled where the Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress. And look, we're in lame duck now, and I'm not putting you on the spot, Congressman, but honestly, I mean, the statute needs to be changed. As a former legislator, the statute needs
to be changed quickly, though, because once Democrats take control in January, what are they going to do with this? I mean, is it Congress's role to make a decision, or is it the White House?
Well, the Congress needs to actually fix the law. Immigration is broken. We need to fix it and have a holistic approach to what do we do with people who are here, that are working? How do we make sure that we secure a border? How do we allow people to come in, not by way of a caravan, but let them fly into work and meet the demands of our economy that aren't being met by our own American people? But I just want to say this. In regard to the courts, we want them to fairly interpret the Constitution and the statutes without a bend to the left or to the right. And if it doesn't go well for Republicans, I'm okay with that. But equal application for everybody, I think, is key. And sometimes a lot of conservatives don't feel like that's the case.
I do have to speak on behalf of legal Hispanics in this country. They are against it. Yeah. I mean, they waited in a line. My mother had to get in this country legally.
The same way, Julie.
Yeah, and she is so adamant, and she does vote Republican because of this issue, because of the immigration issue, because she is insulted. She finds that our country is letting others like her, Hispanic Americans, who came in the right way, they're letting them down.
Yeah, often it's legal immigrants who are most against this open border policy.
Rachel's mom.
No question.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right, moving on.
Okay. President Trump, he's standing firm despite fierce backlash to his decision not to take further action against Saudi Arabia for the murder of columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Take a look.
Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. They did not make that assessment. The CIA has looked at it. They've studied it a lot. They have nothing definitive. This is about America first. They're paying us $400 billion plus to purchase and invest in our country. China and Russia would love to make $100 billion worth of military equipment from Saudi Arabia. We have the contracts. They wanted those contracts. That would be a big, fat, beautiful gift to Russia and to China. They're not going to get that gift.
But the top Republican and Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee are demanding an investigation into whether the Crown Prince ordered Khashoggi's killing. Here's Republican Chairman Bob Corker.
We have a Crown Prince that I believe directed the killing of a journalist. And the language that was used, it was as if they were writing a press release for Saudi Arabia, not for the United States.
And ranking Democrat Bob Menendez tweeting, quote, "The fact is we cannot allow exaggerated profits from weapon sales and other business deals to drive our foreign policy at the expense of our broader interests, human rights, and promoting values that will make us secure over the long term." But the president doubling down, tweeting today, oil prices getting lower. Great. Like a big tax cut for America and the world. Enjoy. $54 was just $82. Thank you to Saudi Arabia. But let's go lower. All right. Well, do you think the president is striking the right tone there, Lisa?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about this because I kind of agree with everyone in the debate to a certain extent, where I do think it is important to send a message to countries that have these egregious human rights violations. I think that's the very reason why we saw President Trump, as soon as we took office, sending those Tomahawk missiles to Syria and showing that we here in America believe in red lines that President Obama didn't follow through with. And I also agree with the people that have concerns about not overreacting, because we do need Saudi Arabia against Iran, especially because under the Obama administration, they pumped a lot of money towards Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, to continue sponsoring state terrorism and bring further instability to the Middle East. So I'm very conflicted on this issue, just to be perfectly honest. Yeah. I also think people aren't talking about the fact that President Trump at least has brought sanctions against 17 individuals who are involved. But I think there is a bipartisan chorus for even, more thorough sanctions with a little bit more teeth.
Sean, what do you think happens to, relations in the Middle East in terms of Iran and the balance of powers if we follow, say, what Democrats and people like Corker say?
I agree with Lisa. I think, first off, it doesn't have to be black or white. We can say, listen, we believe in human rights, and we have the Crown Prince who potentially ordered the murder of Khashoggi. Listen, let's call him out for that. Let's have some sanctions. But let's also realize that if we absolutely distance ourselves from Saudi Arabia, we're actually helping Iran. And I love the left and the hypocrisy here. So Donald Trump saying, I love that Saudi Arabia is going to buy things from the United States and give, thousands of jobs to American citizens, and they're our friends. All the while, Barack Obama gave billions of dollars to Iran.
And they're not our friends.
And they're not our friends. That's right. And they're the lead sponsor of terrorism. So let's call balls and strikes on this and be fair. Again, Saudi Arabia in the balance of the Middle East is important that they remain an ally, but also we should call out their human rights abuses.
Right. Julie, I care a lot about human rights. I mean, I was disgusted by what I learned happened in that embassy in Istanbul. But, we have relations with China. I mean, they are enormous human rights abusers. So how do we make these distinctions? And who do we go after for human rights? And who do we turn a blind eye to?
I mean, I think that we shouldn't be turning a blind eye to any human rights violations. And I think, quite frankly, there's plenty of evidence out there that not only points the Crown Prince and his people and those who work under him and his security team to be responsible for this heinous murder. But I also believe that there needs to be accountability. And I understand that we may need Saudi Arabia a little more than they need us. And I realize that this is an economic and a geographical situation that puts us at an odd place. And obviously we have to make compromises, but we can't let him off the hook.
See, now this is exactly why I think that...
And don't tell me that there's a chance that perhaps he had something to do with it or not. The investigation and all the evidence that the Turkish officials have come forward with are very clear.
So when you say don't let him off the hook, does that mean he should go? Or
something needs to happen.
No, but there has been why multilateral, multinational organizations remain relevant.
He needs to be punished. I'm sorry, he needs to be punished.
And I know people don't like the UN, and I know people don't like the International Criminal Court, and I understand that because I understand people's sensitivity in regards to sovereignty and whatnot. However, institutions like the United Nations and the International Criminal Court allow the United States and other civilized nations to come together and say, we will not stand for these kinds of human rights abuses, and separate that from, for example, from our economic interests.
This whole region doesn't believe in human rights. And,
I know.
and there's
Agreed, and they should be held
They chop
accountable.
off
all these
people's
countries. So
hands
it's
when
not
they
like
steal
we're saying,
something.
you know, we're picking a bad nation in Saudi Arabia that violated.
And they should
human
all be
rights,
held accountable.
But everyone else is so great in the Middle East. Listen, they're all violators. They're all abusers. And so we're going, out of the bad, who's the best?
But this is the
And we're saying
Crown
Saudi
Prince.
Arabia's-
But it's also
Prince. Yes, there's violations going on left and right, but I'm
they go to the top
talking
levels of all
leaders
these
of
countries.
countries should be held accountable.
but as
Right,
a point
and
of
that's the tool
There
of
are
the United Nations.
education camps. There's forced abort in China. I mean, again,
No, it's disgusting.
But as a point of a factual matter, there have President Trump. There's been sanctions against 17 individuals
Right.
that are tied to the Khashoggi
Correct.
killing. So it is inaccurate to say that there has been nothing done. You can make the argument that those sanctions weren't biting enough. There needs to be more done, but there has been some action taken.
If the Crown Prince ordered these killings, nothing has happened to the Crown.
The answer is more American energy, more drilling, more fracking, more American energy.
less dependence on any of
Absolutely.
those countries. All right.
That's
Well,
why
we're-
it's so green.
Yeah.
No, it's legit.
Happy wife, happy wife, happy life,
right?
All right. Well, a potential challenger to Nancy Pelosi for House Speaker Marcia Fudge is